Mr. Dahlerus, will you tell me whether I got almost your last answer to Dr. Stammer correctly? Did you say this? I then realized, that was on the 26th of September, that Goering's aim had been to split Poland and Great Britain and to occupy Poland with the consent of Great Britain. Is that right?
Yes, it's correct, but I should like to say it was the German government's, including Goering's, aim.
The German government, I'm grateful. Now, I want you to tell the tribunal quite shortly how you didn't, or rather why, you didn't realize that aim earlier.
Soviel ich die Antwort des Zeugen vorhin verstanden habe, hat der Zeuge auf meine Frage gesagt, dass das Hitlers Ansicht gewesen sei. Von Göring hat der Zeuge überhaupt nicht gesprochen.
You'll be able to re-examine him.
Now, I want you just to explain to the tribunal, if you'll listen to the questions I put to you, why you didn't understand that at the time. Your original object in seeing Goering at the beginning of July was to inform him that British public opinion had hardened and wouldn't stand another act of aggression. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
The reason you went to Goering is shown in page 8 of your book, if you've got the English version.
Yes.
And, Mr. Dahlerus, I want you to be absolutely sure that when I quote your book, I don't take anything out of its context, as I shall try and make it as short as I can. Just before the break on page 8, you say this: the essence of National Socialism was bellicose and aggressive and completely devoid of all moral scruples in its dealings with other nations. Hitler and his protégé Ribbentrop thirsted after conquest. It was said that Goering had energetically striven for a peaceful solution of the Munich crisis, and this had lessened his popularity within the German government. That was the reason you went to Goering.
Yes.
And when you put your point of view to Goering, his first reaction was that the British government were bluffing over Danzig and Poland.
Yes.
And you wanted and succeeded in arranging the first meeting in order to convince Goering that, according to British public opinion, the British government wasn't bluffing. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, I just want you to turn to page 29 of your book, and that describes the end, at the very top of page 29, which describes the end of your conversation with the defendant Goering in the train before the meeting at the beginning of August. You remember?
Yes.
Goering explained what his aim was, And if you look at the second line, this was a mutual agreement regarding the holding of an Anglo-German conference. Now note the next word, Mr. Dahlerus, with plenipotentiary representatives from both governments. One matter which Goering had always made clear was that he would demand the return of Danzig and certain rights over the corridor, the Polish corridor. Is that right?
Yes.
And from the very start, he wanted a plenipotentiary conference at which territory could, if necessary, be ceded to Germany. Didn't he?
Evidently.
Now, I want you to come straight on to the 24th of August, when you saw Goering and he asked you to go to London. One of the points that he wanted you to stress was that he and the German government thought that there had been a great improvement in their military situation because of the German-Soviet treaty.
That's correct.
And the other, if you turn to the bottom of page 35 in your book, then look at the top of page 36, the reason was his disbelief that the German Foreign Office would be able or willing to establish a sufficiently close contact with the British Foreign Office.
That's correct.
Now, you remember that day that you had the conversation with him, and later on he rang you up at 11:30 before your departure.
Yes.
I just want to tell the tribunal one or two of the things that he didn't tell you on that day. He didn't tell you, did he, that 2 days before, on the 22nd of August, at Obersalzberg, Hitler had told him and other German leaders that he, Hitler, had decided in the spring that a conflict with Poland was bound to come. He didn't tell you that, did he?
I never had any indication or disclosure of the declared policy on the 11th of April or the 23rd of May or the 22nd of August.
You never heard of that? That is document 798 PS, my lord, the one the 22nd of August. You never, as you've told us, you've never heard of the foul vice that had been prepared in April, but I want to get it quite clear about the other one, L79. The 23rd of May, he never told you that Hitler had said to him on that day that Danzig is not the subject of the dispute at all. It is a question of expanding our living space in the East. And I think he also didn't tell you that Hitler had said on that day, our task is to isolate Poland. The success of the isolation will be decisive. He never mentioned to you about isolating Poland.
Never indicated anything in that direction at all.
But I think he did tell you in the earlier interview that he was going to see Monsieur Lipski, the Polish ambassador.
Yes.
Would you give me... He didn't tell you, as I understand you, that he was going to inform Monsieur Lipski that the main obstacle to any diminution of the tension between the two countries was Poland's alliance with Great Britain. Didn't
No.
tell you. That is exhibit GB 39, TC 72, page 119. So that, well, he was asking you to go to England to deal with one side of the matter. He was dealing with Miss Lipsky on the other. Now, I just want you to get clear the situation on the 24th. Did he tell you that the decision had been made to attack Poland on the morning of the 26th?
No, in no way whatsoever.
Now, you were asked to go with for these general purposes that I've put to you. You know now, Mr. Dahlerus, that on the next day, a note verbal was given to Sir Neville Henderson by Hitler on the 25th.
Yes.
And that note, as distinguished from what was said to you later on, talked in general terms about that the Polish question must be solved, so that the effect of the plans as they stood on the evening of the 24th, when Goering rang you up, were that you were going off in the morning with the expression of a general desire for a peaceful solution. The note verbal was to be given to Sir Neville Henderson on the afternoon of the 25th, and at that time, the plan was that Poland would be attacked on the morning of the 26th, when you had delivered your message and Sir Neville had sent on the note verbal. That
Yes.
was the position. Now, did Goering ever tell you why the plan of attack was changed from the 26th to the 31st?
No, he never mentioned anything about the plan of attack, neither that it was changed.
He didn't tell you that this is document TC 90, GB 64. I quote Goering's own words. On the day when England gave her official guarantee to Poland, that was the 25th, the Führer called me on the telephone and told me that he had stopped the planned invasion of Poland. I asked him whether this was just temporary or for good. He said, no, I will have to see whether we can eliminate British intervention. So then I asked him, do you think that it will be any different within 4 or 5 days? Goering never told you that at the time that you were being sent to London, all that was wanted was to eliminate British intervention.
Not at all.
Well, now, I just want you to take again quite shortly. You went and came back with Lord Halifax's letter. I want to make this quite clear, Mr. Dahlerus. Throughout, Lord Halifax made it clear that Great Britain was going to stand by her obligations to Poland, did he not?
Yes.
And then on the 27th of August, the night of the 26th, 27th, at 12:30 midnight, you had this interview with Hitler. Now to you, Mr. Dahlerus, Hitler for the first time made it clear that his terms were that Great Britain should help Germany in securing Danzig and the corridor.
Yes.
Not rights in the corridor, but the corridor. Do you remember when you told that to Mr. Chamberlain, that he was surprised at the difference between what your account and that given to Sir Neville Henderson?
That's correct.
Now, that was, I'm not going to go through it all again, but I just want you to help me from your own book, which you say was carefully and objectively written, as to the state of mind of the rulers of Germany at that time. Now, would you first of all look with regard to Hitler on page 47. That's the passage you've already told the tribunal about when he was shouting, "Dan werde ich Uberta bauen," and that's to begin with.
Yes.
Now, just let me put it to you, it's quite short, how you describe it at the time, and tell me if it's right. If there should be a war, he said, "Dan werde ich Uberta bauen, Uberta bauen, Uberta, Uberta, Uberta." As he said that, did he raise his voice each time?
Yes.
His voice became more indistinct, and finally one could not follow him at all. Then he pulled himself together, raised his voice as though addressing a large audience, and shrieked, "Ich werde Flugzeuge bauen, Flugzeuge bauen, Flugzeuge, Flugzeuge, und ich werde meine Feinde vernichten." And you go on to say, just then he seemed more like a phantom from a storybook than a real person. I stared at him in amazement and turned to see how Goering reacted, but he did not turn a hair. Now, would you mind turning on to page 53? Well, no, just before there's one sentence before the bit that I read on page 47. I just want to get that clear. You say his voice became blurred and his behavior was that of a completely abnormal person.
Yes.
Now if you turn to page 53, I want to just to tell the tribunal your impression of the way he treated the defendant Goering, because the tribunal have heard a lot about the relations between them. At the bottom of the page, you say this: "From the very beginning of our conversation, I had resented his manner towards Goering, his most intimate friend and comrade from the years of struggle. His desire to dominate was explicable, but to require such obsequious humility as Goering now exhibited from his closest collaborator seemed to me excessively repellent and unprepossessing." And would you just turn over page 54 to the 5th line from the end? "I realized that I was dealing with a person who could not be considered normal." That was your considered view, wasn't it, Mr. Dahlerus?
It was the opinion I formed the first time I met him.
Now, I just want you for a moment, that was the Chancellor of Germany. Now I want you for a moment to deal with the Foreign Minister of Germany, according to the impressions that you formed. Generally, I think you got the impression that von Ribbentrop was doing everything he could to interrupt and spoil your endeavors.
That's correct.
But according to Goering, he went further than that. Would you look at page 76? This is, you remember, when you were just saying goodbye to Goering on, I think, your last visit to London after he had drawn the map, which I'll come to in a moment. Do you say this? Before we parted, he again went over the German standpoint, saying finally that if we never met again, he would like to take the opportunity of thanking me for what I had done and for my tireless energy in the cause of peace. I was somewhat surprised by this farewell, and could not help replying that in all probability we should meet again soon. His expression changed, and he said solemnly, "Perhaps, but certain people are doing what they can to prevent you getting out of this alive." That's quite clear, Dahlerus.
Yes.
Mr. Dahlerus, that was said seriously and solemnly.
Exactly.
You go on, at a meeting in October of the same year, Goering told me that Ribbentrop had tried to arrange for my plane to crash. Hence Goering's solemn mien when he bid me farewell.
Well, he mentioned Ribbentrop's name 1 minute beforehand. And then when he spoke about the plane crashing, he said the name he. I assumed it was Ribbentrop.
So that was the foreign minister, according to Goering. Now, I want you just to turn to page 100. Because I want to collect these things. Now, this is a description of the 1st of September, the day, in the afternoon of the day on which Poland had been attacked. And you saw the defendant Goering, at I think the Air Ministry, at one of his offices. Now, do you see, just before the second break, to him, that is to Goering, everything was lined up according to a plan which nothing could upset. Finally, he called in the Secretaries of State, Kerner and Gritzbach, gave them a long harangue, and presented each of them with a sword of honor which he hoped they would carry gloriously through the war. It was as if all these people were in some crazy state of intoxication. These your words?
Yes.
And that is the impression. Of course, you mean that they were mentally intoxicated with the idea of war.
They had changed their frame of mind within a short time.
So that of the three principal people in Germany, the Chancellor was an abnormal, the Reichsmarshal, or the Field Marshal as he was then, was in a crazy state of intoxication, and according to the defendant Goering, the foreign minister was a would-be murderer who wanted to sabotage your plane. Well, now, just let's proceed quite shortly with the what happened after that. On the weekend, the 26th and 27th of August, you went to England. You've told me that you didn't know about the calling off of the attack on the morning of the 26th, and you didn't know that the intention of Hitler was to eliminate English intervention. You didn't know these points. So you went back to England on the 27th with these fuller terms. And the English answer was that while they maintained their obligations, they hoped and recommended that the German and Polish governments might begin negotiations between themselves with regard to the point.
Yes.
And that was the answer that you brought back. Now, I just want you to think for a moment of the interview that you had at breakfast time with Goering, I think in his train or in his headquarters, on the 28th of August. You'll find it at page 65 of the book, if you want to refresh your memory. At that time, didn't Goering try and convince you that the return of Danzig and the corridor would make no difference to Poland's military situation?
Yes.
Because, illustrating it from his own war maps, he thought that Germany was in a position to defeat the Poles anyhow, whether they had the corridor or whether they hadn't.
Yes.
And his air force and the troops were all in position to carry that out.
Yes.
Now, I want you now to come to the question of the meeting at which the terms were given to Sir Neville Henderson. That was at 1915 hours, 7:15 in the evening, on the 29th of August, although the meeting went on for some time. Remember that meeting?
Yes.
And then, as I think one of the council has elicited from you, the difficulty arose over the demand for a plenipotentiary to be back in 24 hours, as you've
Yes.
explained. Now, I think Sir George Ogilvy Forbes told you that that meeting had gone very badly, and then at 11:30 you saw Goering, and Goering said much the same as Sir George Ogilvy Forbes, didn't he, as to how the meeting had gone.
Yes.
And he said that what had upset the Chancellor was that Sir Neville Henderson had characterized or implied that this demand that the plenipotentiary should come within 24 hours was equivalent to an ultimatum.
Yes.
Do you remember at that time that Goering underlined certain of the terms? If you turn to the preface of your book,
Yes.
do you see the facsimile? Have you got it?
I have the original here.
Well, if you just look at it, and would you give me GB 39, page 137? So that's it. Now, it's in German, if you follow the German, and I want just to read the bits which Goering has underlined, and I'll read it in English, and you check to see that I've got the right piece. For the rest, in making these proposals, the German government have never had any intention of touching Poland's vital interests or questioning the existence of an independent Polish state. The German government, accordingly, in these circumstances, agree to accept the British government's offer of their good offices in securing the dispatch to Berlin of a Polish emissary with full powers. They count on the arrival of this emissary on Wednesday, the 30th August, 1939. The German government will immediately draw up proposals for a solution acceptable to themselves and will, if possible, place these at the disposal of the British government before the arrival of the Polish negotiator.
Yes.
That is the bit in which Defendant Goering has underlined, just before the bit about the sending of the plenipotentiary.
Yes.
So that there was no doubt that the Defendant Goering was associating himself with the importance of that point.
Yes.
Now, you remember at that time, that interview, that's the night of the 29th, the Defendant Goering made a great tirade against the Poles.
That's right.
I'm not going to go into that in detail, but then he said to you that the Führer was preparing what I think the English is a magnanimous offer.
Yes.
And to show you the nature of the magnanimous offer, he hatched in a portion of the bits of Poland that is also in the preface to your book.
Yes.
Now, there are 2 points about what he hatched in. In fact, it was much more than had been taken from Germany under the Treaty of Versailles. And secondly, it was entirely different from what was gabbled over by the defendant von Ribbentrop to Sir Neville Henderson the next night.
That's correct.
And Mr. Dahlerus, I don't think I can put it better than in your own words. If you turn to page 75, is this how you record it in your book? The second break. This map, a reproduction of which is given in this book, is extraordinarily interesting because it illustrates the rapidity and recklessness with which the decisions in this question were reached. I had the map with me when I left for London a few hours later, but it turned out that the boundaries drawn up on it differed very considerably from those given in the well-known Project Ribbentrop presented at top speed to Henderson on the night between the 30th and 31st of August. That is, rather less than 24 hours later.
Yes.
And then you give out you go on to describe what it showed. Well, it showed this quite clearly, that 24 hours before that was gabbled over to Sir Neville Henderson, the German government had never seriously considered what portion of the corridor they were going to claim, and what portion they weren't going to claim. Isn't that so? Goering was putting an entirely different thing to you the night before, wasn't he?
The first proposal I brought with me on Sunday morning, the 27th,
yes, but
was only a small corridor.
Yes.
And they extended the claims according to this last plan.
They extended the claims so that the effect of what was put to you, what you were sent to take to announce that a magnanimous offer was coming, was actually an extension of claims, and equally actually quite different from what was suggested the next night by the defendant Ribbentrop.
That's correct.
Now, I just want to ask you one word about an interview which took place on the 31st of August. I think you'll find it at page 84 is your account of it. Interview with, when Sir George Ogilvy Forbes gave you an account of what Monsieur Lipsky had said. I want you to just to tell me this. You did meet Monsieur Lipsky, didn't you?
Yes.
And, of course, obviously, and the same could be said of everyone, I'm sure, of yourself, Monsieur Lipsky was suffering from considerable strain in that most critical time.
He was very nervous.
He was very nervous. And didn't Sir George Forbes tell you that Monsieur Lipsky made his opinion quite clear that the German offer was a breach of Polish sovereignty, and that, in his view, Poland and France and England must stand firm and show a united front, and that Poland, if left alone, would fight and die alone. I mean, that was Mr. Lipsky's mood, wasn't it, at the time?
Yes.
And with regard to the other matter, I'm not going into the details, but there is a considerable and significant difference between the Polish version of the telegram of instructions to Mr. Lipsky and the version which the defendant Goering said showed to you.
Yes.
Now, on the morning of the 1st of September, I think that you saw Goering at 8 o'clock. And would it be a correct description of the way in which he broke the fact that they had attacked Poland by saying that it was very gradual and slow, almost walking backwards, in which he broke the news to you that the attack had taken place?
Well, so much so that I immediately phoned up London and got contact with Foreign Office and informed somebody that according to the information I had received, the Poles had attacked. And they naturally wondered what was happening to me when I gave that information.
Yes. But however, he did eventually admit that they had attacked Poland, and then you had a further interview with Hitler. There's just one point I want you to, I don't think you told the tribunal about the time when he said he'd walked for 10 years. Look at page 98.
Yes?
You see there, just after Willich, sein Jahre kämpfen, he brandished his fist and bent down so that it nearly touched the floor.
Yes.
So that I take it he was in the same state as at the time of your previous interview.
Well, if possible, more nervous.
Yeah. Now, there's just one final matter. If you'd look at page 102, then I shall leave your book. You remember you saw the defendant Goering on the morning of Saturday, September 2nd.
Yes?
Now you say this. To my surprise, he was, that is, more inclined to listen to the viewpoints which I maintain. To my surprise, he was. For as soon as we had sat down in his private drawing room car, he told me that there was talk of a mediation sponsored by Mussolini. Mussolini was said to be fervently trying to stop the war and especially to prevent it from spreading. In the next sentence is, Goering said that he wanted to inaugurate a new Munich. I don't want to put it unfairly, and therefore I ask you, Mr. Dahlerus, is the he in that sentence, does it refer to Goering or to Mussolini?
I think it refers to Mussolini.
You think it refers to Mussolini? Then that was what I suspected, and therefore I won't trouble you further about it, except to ask you this. I've taken you briefly, and I hope you'll agree fairly, through the points on this matter. And are these facts that I've put to you and with which you have agreed, are they the basis of your opinion that the aim of the German government, including Goering, was to split Poland and Great Britain and to occupy Poland with the consent of Great Britain?
Well, if I had known the facts that I've heard later.
Ich glaube, dass diese Frage zu weitgehend ist. Ich habe daher dieser Frage zu widersprechen. Sie bezieht sich allgemein auf die Regierung und auf eine ganz unbestimmte Anzahl von Personen. Außerdem ist es eine gutachtliche Äußerung und keine Tatsache, über die der Zeuge aussagen soll.
The question was, are these facts the basis of your opinion?
The tribunal thinks it's a perfectly proper question and arises directly out of the examination in chief.
Well, now, Mr. Dahlerus, you were answering. I'd asked you, are these facts which I've put to you?
Dr. Sauder, dann bitte ich aber, Herr Präsident, doch dafür sorgen zu wollen, dass geklärt wird, was unter der deutschen Regierung verstanden werden soll, von der der Herr Ankläger andauernd spricht. Die deutsche Regierung besteht aus einer ganzen Reihe von Ministern. Und wenn hier andauernd von der deutschen Regierung gesprochen wird, ohne dass gesagt wird, wer im Einzelnen damit gemeint wird, dann muss der Eindruck entstehen, als ob jeder einzelne Minister dafür verantwortlich wäre und sich an diesen Verhandlungen beteiligt hätte, obwohl er in Wirklichkeit gar nichts gewusst hat. Ich vertrete einen dieser Minister, der von diesen Verhandlungen nichts gewusst hat, und ich habe deshalb ein Interesse daran, dass der Herr Ankläger die Liebenswürdigkeit hat, klarzustellen, wer eigentlich unter dieser deutschen Regierung gemeint ist. Ob also zum Beispiel der Wirtschaftsminister Funk auch damit gemeint ist. Oder ob sich das bloß auf 2 oder 3 andere Herren bezieht.
But, my Lord, I don't propose to argue the case.
This is all what Dr. Sauter has said, matter of argument. And we've already heard the defendant Goering at considerable length about what the government consisted of, and it'll be open to the defendant's counsel when their time comes to argue the case, to argue that the government did not include the members whom they represent. And defendant's counsel don't seem to understand that what they call clarification is a matter which can be done in re-examination. Dr. Starmer will have the opportunity of re-examining, and he can then ask any questions which arise out of the cross-examination.
Well, I put it, Mr. Dahlerus, in this way. Are these facts which you have heard and agreed with this afternoon, are they the basis of the view which you put in that question which you answered to Dr. Starmer this morning?
Yes. At the time when I thought I could usefully make something to prevent a new war, I could definitely prove that nothing was undone by His Majesty's government to prevent it. But had I known what I know today, I would have realized that my efforts could not possibly succeed.
My Lord, there's one other point that I ask your Lordship's indulgence. Dr. Starmer asked for the names of these English industrialists. My Lord, I'm very anxious as representing the British government that there should be no concealment about this matter at all. And I should therefore ask with great all humility that your Lordship would allow me to ask Mr. Dahlerus to give the names simply for that reason.
Yes, sir, certainly, if you wish.
So, Mr. Dahlerus, would you tell us the names of the gentlemen that you met at your wife's estate in Schleswig-Holstein?
Shall I read them or hand them in?
No, read them, if you would.
Honorable Charles McLaren, S. W. Rawson, A. Holden, Sir Robert Rennick, Brian S. Mountain, C. F. Spencer, T. Mensforth.
Thank you very much.
Any other member of the prosecution wish to cross-examine?